Minasan, konnichiwa. Let's just admit it. Learning kanji is really hard. But is it as hard as you think it is? Learning the Chinese-derived characters in Japanese called kanji is often one of the things that scares people the most about learning Japanese, or even being willing to try to learn Japanese. But before you give up on learning the kanji, let me dispel some of your fears about kanji and show you why learning kanji is important for your Japanese and why it might be easier to learn than you previously thought. In fact, kanji is actually really efficient, and I'll show you why. And today's sponsor, MochiKanji, can help with that. I'll talk more about them in a bit. But first, why is kanji considered so scary to people learning Japanese, especially Westerners? And why shouldn't it be scary? Well, there's three reasons why people are often hesitant about trying to learn kanji. It's so different than what they're used to. There's a lot of kanji, and they all seem really, really complicated, right? So let me address these issues one by one, okay? It is different, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily more difficult. It's not what you're used to because it's a logographic system and it's not an alphabet. Even the characters that might be easier for you, like hiragana and katakana, are not really alphabets, but are syllabaries. So yes, learning kanji is definitely different, especially if you come from a background that doesn't use a system like that, but that just means that it's new to you, not that it's better or worse. So once you get used to the concepts in kanji, they'll become easier to learn as you go along. You just kind of have to start, like so many other hard things. Oh, Carl, I can't learn kanji because there's just too many of them. Well, this one does have a little bit of merit to it because there are tens of thousands of kanji, but you don't need to learn all of those in order to read a manga or a website or a newspaper or something like that. So instead of having to learn 10,000 or 20,000 kanji, most people get by with just knowing around 2,000. In fact, when Japanese kids are in school, they're required to learn these 2,136 Joyo kanji. So anything beyond that is kind of like a bonus. Even the N5 in the JLPT, or Japanese Language Proficiency Test, the lowest of the official Japanese tests that kind of measures your ability to read and write and listen, only has 100 kanji on it. So you can get a government certification in Japanese by only knowing 100 kanji. That's definitely doable to start with, right? The last thing that people say is, you know, if you don't grow up reading and writing these type of intricate looking symbols, it can be daunting to think that you have to memorize all these. I look at a chart of them and they all just start to look the same, and then you have all the strokes that have to be written in the exact proper order to be correct. Okay, let me just stop you right there. That can seem intimidating. I felt that way too, but first of all, you won't have to memorize the stroke order unless you're learning Shodo, which is the art of Japanese calligraphy. Even writing by hand is less common in Japan for native Japanese speakers. So much less you as a learner of Japanese, probably not gonna have to worry about that as much. So many people in Japan who are native Japanese speakers spend a lot of their time typing or texting in Japanese, and therefore all of the kanji are done through a different type of input source, usually through some type of hiragana and katakana keyboard on their phone. And then the algorithm in there can guess which kanji they're meaning based on the context, and then they just pick the right kanji so they don't have to write it all out. Even written by hand is becoming less common for the average Japanese person today. Why? Because everything is so digital nowadays. Except, of course, if you graduate from a Japanese university and are applying straight out of university to a job in Japan, then your resume has to be completely written by hand. But if that's not you, then you probably won't have to worry about having to handwrite in Japanese, or even if you are writing in Japanese by hand, which I've been practicing a little bit of too, you don't have to worry about the stroke order. What all this means is, when it comes to the seemingly complicated nature of kanji, being able to recognize and tell the kanji apart is much more important than being able to draw them from memory. Let me explain what I mean by that. There's a concept used in memory studies called recognition versus recall. And so I'll explain this in kind of a simplified, non-scientific manner, but basically recall means the ability to remember or know something without prompting or hints, while recognition is just being able to see something and know what it means or which of a certain type of item is correct. Recall on a test is like a short answer question where you have to write a bunch of sentences and a paragraph, and you're not sure if you got it right or wrong. And then recognition is just multiple choice. Out of these 4 options, A, B, C, or D, which one is the right one? Can you tell which one is correct? So, as you know from experience, the multiple choice tests are often a lot easier than the short answer ones, right? And it's the same with kanji. As long as you can see a kanji and know what it means or the range of possible meanings and sounds it can have, because you've got the kunyomi and the onyomi reading for these kanji. You know, if you've looked into any of this at all, you know what I'm talking about. If you can just tell them apart and know kind of what they mean, then you'll probably be able to operate in Japanese without having to remember the stroke order of the kanji or how to draw it from memory. For example, I can look at this symbol and know that it means nickel. But if I wasn't looking at that and I tried to write the kanji of nickel from memory, I probably would butcher it. But I can read in a book and see that character and be like, nickel, and I know that's a cat. Because when it comes to kanji, especially for learners like you and me, recognition is more important than recall. Kanji wo wakarimasu ka? Zannen desu kedo. And so what does all this mean? It means learning kanji ain't really as hard as you thought it was. Okay, so now I've dispelled some of these common objections that you might have thought or might have heard other people say about learning kanji on your journey towards fluency in Japanese. But it's not only that kanji is easier than you thought it was, it's also that learning kanji is going to help you as you learn Japanese. It is the way towards learning Japanese. It's not a roadblock. Okay, Carl, you've convinced me. Kanji is not as hard as I thought, and I actually need it to achieve fluency someday in Japanese. So how shall I learn all of these characters? But quickly? Well, that is where today's sponsor comes in, MochiKanji. MochiKanji is an app specifically designed to help you learn kanji in a short amount of time. And in fact, you can use MochiKanji to memorize 1,000 kanji and vocabulary in just 1 month. MochiKanji helps you do this through its special feature called Golden Time. And this is an SRS, or spaced repetition system, that prompts you on the specific time of day in which it is most advantageous to your brain to be tested again on the kanji that you've just learned. MochiKanji does this because if you review a word too soon, then it won't be very challenging or beneficial for you. But if you wait too long to review the word, then you'll kind of, forgotten it. And so that's where the golden time comes in, by reminding you to review the best possible time for your brain. This specific time is based on your learning history, and it's completely personalized to your language learning progress. I really like how MochiKanji has more than just one set of kanji that you can study. It's got a bunch of different lists that you can pick from based on what you're studying for. So since my tech job is what has taken me to Japan 2 times already, I really like to study their IT vocabulary list, in addition to the normal ones that they have for the JLPT. MochiKanji also tracks the words that you've learned and ranks them in 5 different levels based on how well you know the word, or kanji. So for example, a word that you have just learned or just started to practice will be ranked as level 1, and then something that you know really well and can be considered in your long-term memory will be put at level 5. So this means that the revision quiz that you're taking at every golden hour is going to update itself automatically so that it's not testing you on things that you already know. Finally, you're not going to have to worry about making your own flashcards inside MochiKanji because MochiKanji has already built all the flashcards for you, complete with kanji and images to go along with them, and audio to make sure you're pronouncing them correctly. And so MochiKanji puts all these things together into one neat little package that makes it easier to learn kanji, which, as you now know, is not as hard as you thought it was. So to get started with MochiKanji, just search for it in the App Store or the Google Play Store and try it for free today. Remember how I said kanji is actually really efficient? Well, Japanese works better with kanji in it, despite what it might seem like. Let me show you some examples. Japanese has a ton of homophones, or words that are different but sound exactly the same. And so the main way that these are distinguished and written are through kanji. What's the difference between ashi and ashi? One means foot and the other means leg. But unless you know the context or you can see it written down in kanji, you won't be able to tell the difference. Same thing with shiro. Did I just say castle or did I say white? Again, this is where the kanji comes to help you. is by knowing these different kanji, you can tell which shiro is which. Same thing with a bunch of the homophones associated with kami. Does that mean deity? Does it mean paper? Or does it mean hair? Because all of these have different kanji, even though they sound very, very similar. And especially with learners who are still trying to pick up the intricacies of pitch accent, these kanji differences are going to help you with distinguishing what's going on when you're learning or reading Japanese. Learning the more simple kanji characters, the more basic ones that look more like the pictographs that they came from, as well as the way that they're classified in the dictionary based on their parts called radicals, can help you understand the more complex characters as you go along. So radicals aren't really exactly the building blocks of kanji like you might have heard, because they're more for classification purposes, because the radical might not always align to kind of the origin of the word or the meaning of the word, but it's still really good to be aware of. And another way learning these more simple kanji can help you is there's a lot of more complicated words that are composed of compound kanji characters. So they take, for example, the character for writing and the character for learning, and you put those together and that becomes the word for literature. Another reason why kanji is actually really useful is because Japanese is not written with spaces like a lot of European or even non-European languages. So without the kanji, it's hard to read a sentence or a paragraph since all of the sounds can run together and the homophones, like I was mentioning earlier, are kind of impossible to figure out. So look at these and tell me how easy it is to read or not. So you can see, without the kanji, these little tongue twisters would be almost impossible to read because they could be interpreted so many different ways. So the kanji actually helps with that. And finally, kanji also helps with the spacing of all of this, in addition to just being decipherable. Japanese written with no kanji, even if you got used to, deciphering it like some kind of secret code, it would just be so much longer to read. Look at this example from the Seisho. You can tell that there were no kanji in here. Every book would be a lot longer and would be a lot harder to read. So you're thinking, well, that's all true and everything, but I don't plan on reading any complicated documents or long novels in Japanese. Do I still have to learn kanji, Carl? I mean, I just want to get into the culture and talk to people, I don't need to write in Japanese. I just need to be able to speak it. I don't need kanji to be able to speak Japanese. I mean, sure, technically you can learn how to speak Japanese and not know any kanji, which doesn't sound like a good idea, but yes, it's possible. But if the reason that you're getting into Japanese is so you can connect with other people and engage with the culture, then the Japanese writing system is one of the main ways that you're going to do that. And so kanji is super important for that reason. A lot of people, because of manga and anime, decide that they want to learn Japanese because they like these forms of media so much. And so you can kind of learn how to speak a little bit from anime, and you can use manga to help you with your reading. But if one of your goals is to be able to read manga in its original Japanese and not translated into English or some other language, then you know what you'll have to learn? Kanji. And manga actually makes it easier for you to do that because of all the furigana, right? That tells you how to pronounce these different types of kanji within a story, within a context. I've talked about this before in other videos. So in that way, the Japanese manga industry is helping to teach you kanji. Now, it would be easy to think, well, when I go to Japan, I won't have to worry about kanji because all the signs are bilingual and I'll be able to get around just fine. And I won't have to worry about kanji when I interact with people because I'll just be able to speak Japanese. And I tell you, on my 2 recent trips to Japan, I wish that I had known more kanji. I mean, I did know some, but I wished I'd known more because then I could have read the menu more easily at places. There are some restaurants, that'll have a bilingual menu, but for the most part, even in an urban area like Tokyo, a lot of the menus are still in kanji and they don't have furigana. And even if there is an English menu, it'll probably be abbreviated and you won't get access to the full menu unless you can actually read kanji. And you can try to translate it on your phone by taking a picture, but I mean, that's also not going to work the best either. I've tried. Finally, one of the main reasons that you want to speak Japanese or go to Japan is so you can have Japanese friends and connect with people from that culture. So how are you going to talk to these Japanese friends after you leave Japan? Most people in Japan keep up with one another digitally via an app called Line. And so if you make friends in Japan and you've got Line, chances are they're probably going to want to keep up with you by speaking Japanese to you. You could try to translate things back and forth, or you could just rely entirely on English. Maybe they want to practice their English, but honestly, I thought you were learning Japanese. So, if you make friends in Japan in order to connect with Japanese people and Japanese culture, then it's imperative for you to be able to read and write in Japanese using kanji so that you can communicate with your new friends and make sure that you keep them as friends. So to get started with MochiKanji, just search for it in the App Store or in the Google Play Store and try it today for free.